I'm Beck and welcome to my November wrap-up. I read, I think 5 books, maybe 6 books, I'm not sure, but you'll find out by the end of the video during November, and so I thought I'd talk about all of them. I also thought, have I put down any books this month? And I actually haven't. I've either started and continued or finished everything so far, which is a pretty big achievement. So I'll start on The House Witch 3, and this is a cozy fantasy series, and cozy fantasy means a very low stakes series that has interpersonal relationships, and there's no usual external force. Like in a fantasy book, for example, there might be a war happening or a rebellion against the crown, or someone has died and there now needs to be a huge mission or something like that. You know, fantasy, chaotic quests. In cozy fantasy though, it's very much more contained. And I found that in the third book in the House Witch series, I started this series for a cozy fantasy vibe, and then it ended up going more towards that fantasy element. And the way the pace worked as well, it's like events kept happening, but they felt like the pinnacle. So I kept not feeling right, like the book should have ended. So the pace made it feel like it was just dragging on, which was disappointing because I liked the first 2 books and they could definitely be called cozy fantasy because they are contained. But in this book, there's, a dragon, there's a war, and our main character, who is named Finley Ash Owen, he's supposed to be a chef and he's come to the royal court to cook for the king and queen, but he's a house witch as well. And so the more he fosters that trust and that care in his home environment, in his kitchen, the more powerful he becomes as a witch. And so he becomes almost this formidable witch because everyone has become like his family and they trust him. And so I liked the found family element in the first 2 books, but then it became like supporting his power, and it changed the dynamic of the story in book 3, and I didn't really love that. And at a certain point when I was reading this book, I was listening to the audiobook and just, vacuuming my house, and I thought, I really hope this ends soon. And I checked it and I still had ages left. So that is not a good sign. So I initially settled on a 3 for this book, but I'm probably going to lower it to a 2. I just wish I'd read the first book or even the first 2 and just stopped there, because it just went in a direction that I was not enamored by. So then I felt like I was in a little bit of a rut and I wanted a shake up, and I saw this and I thought, you know what, this sounds ridiculous and fun and I'm gonna try it. And that's Smash and Grab, which is the first book in the Relic series, and it's a dinosaur shifter male-male romance. I'll let you digest that for a second. And it's about Simon, who is an archaeologist, and he's working on the fossil that's going to change his career. And because it's a very valuable fossil, obviously, these goons come and try and steal it from him so they can palm it on the black market. And then in comes this knight in shining armor to save Simon, and he's got a pink mohawk and he saves the day, and him and Simon go off and disappear and run away from these goons, right? And the guy that was sent in with the pink mohawk, he's actually a dinosaur shapeshifter, and he works for a company called Relic, who protect fossils and return them to their rightful owners, whether that's in a museum or in a different country or whatever. So the whole idea is to protect the fossil that Simon is working on, and while he's doing that, he takes Simon on the road with him. So it's an incidental forced proximity romance of these 2 guys who obviously have a love of dinosaurs, and then being on the road together for like a week, they end up getting together, and it was steamy and it was spicy. I really enjoyed the dynamic between both of them. The Mohawk guy, I think Daryl is his name, I can't remember now, but he's the guy who kind of pushes the envelope all the time, and Simon is really shy but interested. So it was cool to see their dynamic and how much he could get away with poking Simon. I settled on a 4 stars for this because I just had so much fun with it, and it was just ridiculous and timed perfectly because it was such a short audiobook and I smashed my way through it, no pun intended, and I think I definitely read it at the right time. I went out and got the sequel on audiobook as well, and I'm currently listening to that actually. I didn't quite finish it for this wrap up, which I'm a little bit annoyed at myself about, given that I only have 40 minutes of it left, but it just didn't work out. So it's called Sink or Swim, and this one follows, I think his name is Baha, and the love interest Jackson. So this time, instead of, Simon's character, for example, being an archaeologist with no knowledge of shapeshifters whatsoever, the 2 characters that are love interests in this book are both shapeshifters already. So Baha, it's from his perspective. He works for Relic and he was in book 1 as well. And he's been sent on this mission on a cruise ship, and he's been sent alongside Jackson, and Jackson is like this independent, and he's also a dinosaur shapeshifter, and he goes, I know that they're selling fossils on the black market here, and there is one that you're going to be really interested in. I don't want to work for these guys anymore, because he's been doing his own version of not selling on the black market, but protecting whatever fossils he could. And so he comes to Relic with a proposal, and then Baha and him get sent on the cruise ship for this mission. And while they're there, they have to pretend that they are fake fiancés, because otherwise Baha wouldn't have been able to get on the ship without Jackson's invitation, because he kind of knows these circles. So already it's like, I hate this person, we have to fake our romance. And it's just set in such a close proximity as well with the crews and the cabins that naturally sparks are going to fly. And sure enough, it's had several spicy scenes which are very steamy, and I like the dynamic between these two. It's almost grumpy sunshine, which is fantastic. I love that as a trope in romance books. To compare it to the first one, I'm actually not sure which one I like more. I really wanted to settle on around a 4 stars for this, but I haven't quite read the ending, so I can't give you a proper rating yet, but it's kind of approaching that. So depending on how it ends, I'll either do a 4 stars or a 3.5. So it's in a good ballpark, I think. I don't know at this stage if I'm going to continue. I do want to. They're like fun bite-sized reads, and I love dinosaurs. So if you like male romance and dinosaurs, like if you're in that audience, which I am, you're going to enjoy these as well. So I would recommend them for a bit of fun. Then I found an audiobook that was part of my Audible subscription, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll read this. And that is Witches Get Stuff Done. And it follows Riley. She's on this ferry at the beginning of the book, and she's going to this island, but she's never been there before. But apparently her mother grew up there, and she's going there to meet this aunt that she's never met before in her life. And she's going there to kind of rekindle her past, because her mother has passed away a couple of months ago, and so she's trying to go and reconnect. And while she's there, magic starts to wash over her, and a lot of secrets come to light about her past and who her mother was and who she is and what her responsibilities are now. And she realizes, yeah, I have been able to see ghosts my entire life. And on the island, she realizes that she's got different responsibilities and an inheritance that she needs to manage. So I liked that element of it, but the way this was pitched to me was, oh yeah, she's a witch and she's going to find a coven so that she can understand her powers. But that's kind of secondary to her character journey of loss and understanding where she belongs in the world. So you need to understand that first before you can enjoy the witchy part of the book as well. So I liked this. It had a great storyline. There was also a love interest named Edison, and I like how they had a back and forth and an understanding of each other. There wasn't really miscommunication in this story, which is amazing because I personally just hate miscommunication so much. And so it set them up in a really good stead, and they had this really sweet romance together. It was a subplot to the actual story. So there are 2 other women in the book, and they become quite close friends with Riley. Their names are Alice and Carolyn, and they kind of go through shenanigans together and they help out ghosts. And I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was quick. It was fun. There was great banter. There was great world building. It was all believable enough, and it just flowed, and it was a great time. And I realized that the other, I think 2 books in the series are on Audible, so I've gone and I've downloaded them both as well, which is probably going to throw out my reading plans for the end of the year, but I feel like I've accidentally committed now. And then I think I would have read so many more books this month if I hadn't read and finished this behemoth, and that is Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, which is a 1,300-page book. And I'm so proud of myself that I read and finished this book. And it was more of like an espionage book rather than a here is the present action, okay, go. And the other 3 books in the series have obviously had that action, but they've also had those quieter moments too that have built up all the characters. So it was really great to see that all of these characters went in their own kind of directions and stories, but there was space in the background to build up some of those more side characters as well. And, you know, Kaladin, who is my favorite character, and he's like the pinnacle hero of the story, he suffers very much with depression and mental health. And so over the past couple of books, you've seen it very much play a role in his character development, but in this book it's more so addressed as something that he needs to understand, and rather than run away from it, to address it. And I really just appreciated that as a breath of fresh air, because I'm like, why can't psychologists exist in this world? Like, he needs help. There are characters that need assistance, and I love that this is a step forward for mental health in this world. And I also just enjoy his action sequences in general, and how they're intertwined with the magic system, and how the espionage and the world building of where they are in this book has just wound itself together so well. And there was just so much exposition and explanation. It's just such an intriguing and detailed story, and it set up so many things for the last book, and I'm so terrified, but I'm so excited. Obviously this reread I gave 5 stars because I'm anticipating the sequel, Wind and Truth, on the 6th of December, and I am completely not fine or normal about it. I need it in my hands right now. I did quite well, even though I was panicking for weeks while I was reading this, going, I need to read this faster, and I actually succeeded. So well done to me. Another audiobook that I listened to and finished was a non-fiction title, surprisingly, vastly different to the other books that I've had on this wrap up so far, and that is Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism. And it's essentially in the title, in terms of what the subject matter is. So the author has gone and investigated and interviewed people from various different cults. And so she talks about the language of the cults, the way perspective shifts, and how elements of cultish language work. And she did that by delving into cults specifically, like the Jonestown cult, Scientology, multi-level marketing cult that we see online, like pyramid schemes and social media things, yoga, she even mentioned as well. And it was pretty chilling to hear stuff like drink the Kool-Aid and how that's actually cultish language that's just pervaded our vocabulary. I don't really say it, but I think it's more of an American thing, potentially. And it refers to a mass death event of the Jonestown cult in 1975 when 900 people drank poison. And so I'm like, oh, drink the Kool-Aid. That's not a normal thing to say in everyday conversation. Like, that has trauma attached to it and a lot of death. So the fact that language evolves and how cults, especially like modern day social media cults, put forward that toxic positivity, for example, or bring people into their way of thinking was really interesting to read about. So I really liked how this analyzed the language, and it showed you the repetition and the style that cults use to make you belong to their community. So that part was fascinating. I did wish it explored more of like the psychology, for example, of what goes into cults, as in how people would join them and how they would be led. But aside from that, it was a great starting point for reading about cults as subject matter, because cults, you know, they terrify me. I'm sure they terrify a lot of people. And that's why I wanted to read about them, because they are fascinatingly terrifying. Like, I can't look away. I need to know about them. And I figured reading Cultish would be a good way to start that journey. I don't know what to read next. And I do want to read more cult-focused, psychology-focused books, if that makes sense. So if you've got any recommendations, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just do some Googling. I'll probably fail, but at least I'm going to try. And I don't also rate my nonfiction books, but in terms of this one, I think it's one that was enjoyable, easy to read, easy to understand. And so I think, you know, if you want to try it, go for it. I wouldn't say I was 100% enamored by it all of the time, but it was interesting and I was invested in understanding what was going to happen next. So it was a good book and I liked it. And now we're at the part of the video where I go, this is what I'm reading now, and it's hopefully what I'm going to finish. And so I already talked about Sink or Swim, which is my current audiobook, so hopefully I'll finish that shortly. I'm filming this a little bit early in November, so I've got a few more days left, so I'll probably finish that in the next few days. I'm also reading Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and I'm reading this because the third book in the series comes out in January, so I thought I would reread, refresh, and then understand what goes on in the third book, because I'm sure there's so much stuff, so many characters that I've forgotten, so that's what I'm doing right now. This is a story about Violet. She goes to a war college to learn how to ride dragons, and there is a whole lot more to it, but all you need to know is war college, spicy scenes, dragon riders, and that really sets the tone for this story. I've also got a spoiler-free review of it if you want to know a little bit more but don't want to be spoiled, so I'll link that down below for you as well. But I'm just enjoying myself. It's a fun book and I'm having a fun time. And I figured I needed to pick it up before I started the fifth book in the Stormlight Archive series, because this is so much faster to read than a Stormlight book. The text is bigger, the chapters are shorter, it's just more snappy. But really, that is all I'm reading right now. That is all I read in November. Let me know if you've read anything similar or if you read a lot or a little during the month. I'd love to know, but thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down below in the comments and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.